Welcome to the Forging Honor podcast. I'm Jonathan George.
And I'm Benjamin Jones. Here at Forging Honor, we explore what it means to live as Christian men. Along the way, we'll be doing challenges, building habits and character through action.
Welcome back to Forging Honor After Hours. This is the final episode for a long time. I don't know how long, but for a period of time. So Banjo and I are going to do a bit of a retrospective, kind of a wrap up on the this last year, on the last 2 years of the show. I can't believe we've made it 2 years already. What is it?
Long time.
This is episode, 68, I think?
Yeah, 68 is what I
Something
had
like
counted.
that. Yeah, it's wild. I'm just excited. It's the final episode, so we're going to take it a bit slower. And this is kind of just a retrospective, honestly, more for us than for the listener. Like, if you want to listen to us talk about the last 2 years and any advice about podcasting and anything like that we can give, if you want that, go ahead and listen. And I'm sure we'll have some ideas about what podcasts could do to improve and what we could have done better. But things that we enjoyed, all that stuff. So, our typical episode usually starts with us going, how have the last 7 days been on our challenge? But Banjo, instead of the last 7 days, how have the last 2 years been podcasting retrospective? Just dive right in.
Yeah. Wow. One thing that I do want to say on the record is that this was JJ's idea, and I mean that 100% in a not pass the buck sort of a way, but like credit where credit was due. JJ was the one who was like, "Hey, Banjo, I got this idea for a podcast," and I was like, "That sounds really good." And JJ is a man of vim and vigor and enterprise, and he went out and got it done. Where most men would merely dream, JJ rushed in and did, and I admire him for that.
Thank you.
And I'll be honest, I thought it was probably going to last about 10 episodes. I thought it was probably going to last maybe a month and a half before we either ran out of things to talk about or
that happened episode 1.
Super busy.
we ran out of things to talk about really quickly.
Because I had tried podcasting before a couple of times and not with any great success. And so I was not terribly optimistic. But I think what we had going for us was we had a lot more vision than some of the other projects I've been a part of. And I thought what we were doing was really interesting, really just because, like we've said before, it was the kind of conversations that you and I would normally have if we were having a cigar or a beer or a cup of coffee, and just stuff that we would talk about, and then just recording it. And so, as always, it was just us recording something that we wanted to hear more than trying to do something super fancy. And I think that was good. And I think we learned a lot along the way, both about really technical stuff, some of which I still don't understand. I am the laziest son of a gun when it comes to hosting a podcast. I pretty much just show up and talk and bring a couple of guests from time to time. But our very hardworking producer Elliot does so much to make us sound very good. Right. And JJ does really does the lion's share of a whole bunch of stuff around here. So, but it's been a lot of fun. I feel like I've learned a lot about myself, certainly about you, and gotten to talk to some really amazing people. I've been really kind of blown away by the people we've gotten to talk to over the last couple of years.
That is super cool about podcasting, that you get to say, "Hey, I have a podcast. Can we talk?" And I think 9 times out of 10, I think there was 2 guys I reached out to that it didn't work out, mostly because of timeline, not because they weren't interested. Right. It's stuff like that where everyone else we reached out to, we were able to make it work. And that was a ton of fun. And I have to say, it's been a fun journey alongside you. And while it was originally my idea, I would not have been the same without you, without Banjo, the intrepid adventurer, the English man alongside me. I think Banjo was a bit of the realist to my vision, helped rein it in at times, and that was good.
Which is super ironic considering what folks normally hear on the pod.
It's so true.
Yeah.
Well, it's kind of I think, kind of a bit about ourselves. It's I'm a visionary when it comes to what I want to do, but I can be very realistic about like what actually works. And I feel like sometimes you're a little bit the other way around. We're like, you're like tampering down the vision a little bit, but as soon as we get into it, you're like, oh yeah, let's do all this. Yeah. Let's have all these ideas.
Well, yeah. Yeah.
Anyway.
It's kind of like once I'm committed to a project, I want to do it like 100%.
Right.
And I have certain things and I'm like, well, let's do it. But most of my like tampering comes in the vision section because I want the scope to really be tight.
At any rate, definitely would not have been able to do any of this without you. I think the thing that I appreciated most having you as a co-host really came to bear during the interviews. Your interview questions were very insightful, always very good. I enjoyed. I always look forward to having you interview the folks that I was bringing on, because like I'd had cool conversations with these people before. I kind of knew some of what I wanted to ask them, but then you didn't necessarily know them, and so you had a whole new set of questions, and that was always fun. So I really enjoyed that.
I always felt like this was my 15 minutes. This was my chance to talk to these people. And I was like, I gotta get these folks now. Like even the last couple of weeks when we had, Dr. Grant, right, who wrote the Teddy Roosevelt book. I didn't realize that he'd written that book until like 15 minutes before we did the interview.
Right.
And then I was
you were looking at his book list and you're like, wait, that's the one.
I've read that book. I know that.
Yeah.
That book. Did you have maybe a favorite interview that we did? Is there one that looking back, you're like, that was the most that sticks with you the most?
I don't want to pick favorites because I knew a lot of the people. I did, however, thoroughly enjoy within this last year. There were a couple of episodes that stand out in my mind. The one that we did with Jamie Crampton was really good. I thought that was a great way to kick off kind of our interview. Because like, just to break it down a little bit, we've done 2 years of this, and the first year was a very different format. It's all of season 1. If you go back through the show, if you're on Apple Podcasts, it breaks it down into seasons. Season 1 is our first year, and we only were doing an episode every 2 weeks. We rarely interviewed. We tried a format at one point where we interviewed other young men who were doing the challenge, and that was interesting. That was kind of fun. But our first like real interview was Jamie Crampton, I think. And that was he our first one actually?
I'm pulling up the list right now.
I'm not sure he was actually the first, but he helped kick off a great season in Bible reading. Love that. But then also I thought that the Dave Raymond episode, that one, I got a lot out of that one. But the one I think I might have gotten the most excited about was actually the John McCollum episode, the tech episode. Because that was the one that kind of inspired a whole season of ditching the smartphone and just giving that a shot. And that was really, really fun. And I got a lot of great feedback from that one. I think because it was so out there and so different. And it was really cool because that was exactly the type of show we were going for in terms of young men trying to apply things to their lives. So I really liked that. What about you?
I've been thinking about that John McCollum episode recently because I have been toying with the idea of blocking YouTube on my computer. I already have it blocked on my phone.
Yeah.
But I've been toying with the idea of blocking on my computer just because I've had so many times in the last few weeks where I'm like, man, I'd like to sit down and do some writing, or I'd like to sit down and do some of this. And then I'm like, I'll just check YouTube first. And it's usually innocuous, like, I'm going to go check, there's this scene I want to write is going to match this scene over here. So I'm going to go watch this scene from another movie, and then I spend 45 minutes on YouTube. So I've been thinking about his episode a lot. I also have a hard time wanting to pick favorites. They're just I think the Dave Walker episode has stuck with me the most. Honestly, it's the one that I hang the hat on the most, if I can put it that way.
Well, I think that whole learning series, as well. But Dave Walker, that was our exercise series, actually.
That was our exercise.
That was a really interesting series. We had Kyle Erickson on with that one too.
Yeah, that was good.
Kicked off a whole, like, I got a gym membership and I've been going to the gym regularly ever since. Like that season is what did that for me.
Yeah.
And before that, I was not a regular gym goer. So that was really cool.
Yeah. I think if I could pick one series that I think I was maybe the proudest of, would be the education challenge. Like,
I think so too. That was one of the best. The learning, reading. I think partially that's one of the ones we put a lot more effort into in terms of getting quality interviewees. I think I think that kind of jumps into Like the seasons that I didn't like as much looking back are the ones we just didn't put in the effort on getting the interviews that we wanted. And that's completely on us. Like at the end of the day,
we just didn't know the right people.
That's
that was
part
the
of
other
it,
thing.
yeah.
Sometimes we got, sometimes our eyes were bigger than our stomachs on like a couple of different ideas where it was like, oh, it'd be really good to do. We really want to talk about this idea, but we just didn't have the expertise or the people around us to talk about it. So, but yeah, I agree. Those were probably some of our, when it was us talking about what we knew, that was always some thin ice.
Yep. Yeah, it's definitely as two young men doing this, there's a lot of danger, I think. Like, you know, the podcasters that are out there that are in their 40s, 50s, 60s, they've got a lot more to say.
Yeah.
They've got real wisdom. And we approach this as we have no clue what we're doing. Let's ask other people about it. And the episodes where we really stuck to that, we really shined. The episodes where we did not, I think, honestly, could be really improved. And if I was going to go back and do all of this again, I would want to put a lot more effort into getting quality interviews.
Yeah. If anybody's thinking about taking this on for themselves, I think one of the biggest things that I would recommend is like start really slow. I think we tried to do at the, maybe not the outset, but at some point we're like, we're going to do an episode every week. And maybe we made that shift a little too.
The second year.
It was the beginning of year 2, second year, which was a good transition. I think the hard part was once you get into a place where you're generating content, then you're on the clock, and then you have kind of like a time debt that you have to figure out. And I think it's a little bit easier, at least at the beginning, and when it's almost more of a hobby than anything else. It's easier when you're like, okay, so this one time a month is when we record. Yep. And then you can put the effort into getting some of those guests set up. If anybody's looking for advice.
Totally.
Do you have a challenge that you were like, this one was the hardest, this was the most difficult for me to stick with?
Oh man, of all the challenges we did, because if you include season 1, or if you include year 1 along with year 2, which encapsulates, I think
you have to.
Again, year 1 is all put into one season because we just weren't dividing things up well. And so we did one challenge every 2 weeks, which was really weird. And we did a lot of interesting challenges, but some of them just weren't as applicable. I'm trying to think like what was the hardest challenge in terms of sticking with it? I mean, honestly, I've probably forgotten it because it was like I didn't stick with it.
Yeah. I know what it is for me.
I know that the one that I've wished I did more of and have not done is the ice bathing. We did that way back when.
Possibly our best title episode.
What
I'm
was
looking back on it. Do you remember what it was? It was In Cold Blood.
Oh, that's a good title. Yeah, I like that.
That was a good title. Everybody Talks, the previous episode about having conversations. That was also pretty good.
That was a fun. I liked the conversation one actually. That was an interesting.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun.
What about you? What was your most difficult?
The most episode breakfast was the
what
hardest one.
What did we do? What was the challenge?
Do you remember what the challenge was?
I don't actually remember that.
It was fasting.
Oh, yeah. You know, that's something I've actually done. Not consistently, but it's something that I have implemented in seasons of my life. I've gone, oh, that was good to do. I should do that again.
That's one that I wish I would go back to. That's one that a challenge that I wish I had done more often. The way that we went about that challenge was very difficult. It was really good. I think it really helped I think it was a really useful spiritual discipline. Actually, I take that back. I think I have had one other day of fasting. Yeah.
Since then.
Since then I have used that. Now that I think about it, and it's been a really helpful. I think it's just a helpful mindset shift. I don't do it very often though. It's not something that I like. I'm eager to incorporate, but feel like I should say I'm eager to do it, but the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak.
Yeah, I definitely think we had some tough ones in there, and I think some of that was just, maybe it was something we saw on the internet, or it's something we heard about on another podcast, and we just wanted to try it. And those were good in the sense that it met the basic qualification of we're the hosts, we're going to be the guinea pig for this, we're going to try it out. But I think there were a few challenges in there that we just kind of came away from and went, not sure everyone needs to do this. Yep. But there were other challenges in there that I think absolutely were things that everyone needs to do. For me, the ones that really jump out are, I mean, honestly, some of the ones this year we put a lot more thought into the 6-week challenges rather than the 2-week challenges. I mean, the Bible reading, the prayer, both of those, huge. Everyone should be doing those. I think that the exercise, if you're physically capable, you should be doing that. I think even the education, if you're in the time of life where you can set aside 30 minutes a day to read and put some time into some more self-education, I think you should be doing that. And I don't say that like there are all kinds of things, I say things like, oh, everyone should, watch Lord of the Rings or something. Like, I don't mean it in that sense. Yeah, right. I'm saying that as a young man, I think it's imperative that you do some of these things. I don't think as a young man, it's imperative that you go do ice bathing or that you fast every week or, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Were there any challenges that we didn't do that you wish that we had? Like the ones that we talked about, ones that you thought, oh, this would be good for us to do that we just never got around to doing?
I wanted to revisit, this might be a bit of a cheat. I wanted to revisit the waking up at the same time every day. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to go back and redo that as going to bed at the same time every day. I think that would have been really interesting.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah.
And so that's something I thought about.
That would be harder for me.
It would be difficult for a lot of people, but I've read about it since, and that's one of those things that there's some good research out there. I can't remember who, but there's some good research that has shown locking in your bedtime is more effective than locking in a wake up time. Because if you lock in your bedtime, you actually have more control over that. Your wake up time is kind of dictated by the next day's schedule. And so you'll set your alarm for whatever time. And versus if you can set your bedtime to be a regular time, you naturally fall into a better rhythm. So that's something I wanted to experiment with. But again, we haven't tried it, so I don't actually know if it's true or if it works for us.
Right.
What about you?
Yeah. I don't know. I think there was always a part of me that wanted to see if we could do a real tech-free challenge. Like if we could do like a total no screens for 6 weeks.
Man, that would have been really hard.
It would have been really difficult.
Or at least no personal screens. Like leave work out of it, probably. You have to.
Or even like maybe no movies. No movies for 6 weeks would have been really tough for me.
No movies.
Or no TV.
Just no entertainment. Like you just kind of call it as visual entertainments. No movies, no TV.
No digital
YouTube, no social media, nothing like that. That would
have been really tough.
That would be a fun one to do.
That was always the back of my head because I was like, these are supposed to be challenges. Are we going far enough with it? Are we pushing ourselves far enough? And that was one where I was like, well, you haven't done this yet. You haven't. That's the edge that we haven't pushed.
I think like if we were to redo this and have a little bit more longevity in mind, I might extend the challenge period so that we could really try some of these things. So instead of 6 weeks, like make it 2-3 months and record less frequently, but really be able to dig in on some of the interviews and really be able to dig into some of the research about why we're doing this. I think that would make for some really good quality information, some good quality listening for other young men who are trying these things.
Is there an area of your life where you feel like you've grown the most working through these challenges and figuring these things out?
Honestly, I think that the scripture reading challenge really helped kind of reinvigorate my daily Bible reading in a big way. That one, the education challenge got me reading again for the first time since college, really.
And you kind of took off on a tear. Like you were
I did. And I'm still reading, I knocked out, with the holidays, it's been tough, but before Thanksgiving, I knocked out a few books. In the 2 weeks leading up to Thanksgiving, I had some time. And like I've enjoyed reading again in a way I had not in a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah. What about you?
I'm looking back through our catalog and trying to narrow it down. I think the reading God's word was really helpful for a time. I've feel more like I've lapsed on that one. more recently. I think, recently we had the conversation with Beck Oderson about education. And I think it was in that episode he talked about the importance of clarity.
Right.
Like in terms of your, if you're trying to convey an idea, doing it with clarity is going to beat like passion and emotion. And that has had a huge effect on my writing, even in the last couple of months. Like it's totally changed the way that I think about telling a story or working through a problem even teaching at school. Because I'm much less focused on like, let me come across with passion, let me come across with energy. It's much more about, okay, well, if I am extremely clear in what I'm trying to say, and I just try and put this in the most effective way possible, in that I'm effectual, to use a very reformed word. If I'm able to get this in the most effectual way possible, then that's going to be the most worthwhile.
Right.
That's been really good. That's at least the thing that jumps to mind is like, well, this has had the most immediate effect.
I'm also looking back at the catalog now. The episode "Walk This Way" jumps out at me.
The one where we walked every day?
After meals, specifically. So we would go for a walk after a meal, and it'd be like 10, 20 minutes. That's one I kind of wish I'd stuck with. I really enjoyed that one. I think there was good thought time in there, and it was just good for overall health.
Do you have an episode that, looking back, you're like, that probably wasn't our best, but it's still one of my favorites?
I don't know. Like, what would be one of those? I'm just also looking back through the catalog now. I feel like, the one, or the cut the crap episode where we got rid of something every day.
Right,
I think we could have approached that one a lot better, but I think the core, the nugget of it was really good. Of the getting rid, like trying to do away with materialism.
Yeah. I that was a good one. That was one where I definitely felt like, I feel like there's a better way to do what we're trying to do here, but I can't think of what it is that would be a more effective way. Yeah. My episode like that is just a couple episodes before the Nameless Men and McCarthy episode, where we read through the Cormac McCarthy after Cormac McCarthy died, is one that I was like, this is a for me episode. Like, this is not a great like habit that people need to like take forward in their lives, but I super enjoyed our conversation. That's actually one of the few episodes that I've like gone back and listened to.
Oh,
normally
really?
I'm like, there's been a couple times I haven't done this recently, but I used to, after we would record, I would listen through our episodes just to make sure that I had like the conversation in my mind at some point through the week. And since maybe like the education episodes, I haven't done that as much, just because I found I more enjoy like coming without any pretentious thought background and just being like, well, this is the conversation I'm having today. So I don't know. I may have been repeating myself for the last 4 weeks. It's a possibility, but that episode is one of the few that I was like, I think I might listen to that one again. That one was fun.
Yeah. Some neat episodes in there. What would you say your number one regret is over the last 2 years in regards to the show? Not in regards to life, in regards to the show. Let's be clear.
Well, that narrows it down, I suppose. Number one regret. Long
awkward silence.
Long pause. Yeah, sorry. Dead air is not supposed to happen. I think probably my biggest regret would be that in doing a show like this, I think what you're trying to do is you're not trying to do something for yourself. You're trying to present something to other people that is going to be helpful and useful and edifying. And above all is going to like bring glory to God. Like that's the biggest thing. And I think somebody pointed this out to me recently. I'm trying to remember the way exactly that they put it, but they said like the thing that you care most about is the truth and like what is the truth of this thing, and sometimes you forget about like you forget that there's you forget that there's people involved in the truth, you know, and that there's people around it. And I personally have a tendency to, like, if I see that something is true, or believe that something is true, I'm like not going to shake free of that thing. And if I feel that somebody is like a hair's breadth off of that thing, it takes me a while to compromise on that. And even the way that I'm saying that is revealing of the way that I feel about that idea. It's like, okay, maybe it's not really so much of a compromise. Maybe truth is a bigger square of real estate than just me standing on it, you know? And I think there are, you know, a number of episodes. I think particularly, you know, we had that one in the middle. I actually forget which one it was. But where like we kind of got into it on an episode where I think I was kind of like, no, this is my, you know, the square of real estate that I'm going to be on, and only where I'm at is truth, and there can be no other. And I think that was probably too far, and too I was not as humble as I should be. That was, you know, in that conversation
in the midst of season 5, I think, looking back at episodes about the responsibility and ritual,
right?
Which that one was kind of an odd one because we kind of tried to stretch, I think, what ritual meant. And I think that's part of what led to that. Was exactly right. Like we both had somewhat different idea going into that, what the challenge would look like.
Yeah. That was speaking of like times where we didn't spend extra time and like that bit us in the butt. That was an episode. The concept of the ritual thing was something that we came up, I think, like the day before we recorded. And like we hadn't had a conversation about what ritual was going to be or what that was going to look like.
Yeah,
we kind of just went into it and we're like,
was lax.
Yeah. And so we hadn't, you and I hadn't discussed at all what it was going to look like. And we're like, we'll figure it out on air.
Yeah. That was a bad idea. Don't do that. Don't do that. If you're doing a podcast, don't figure it out on air. Plan ahead.
Which is not to say that you can't have things where you're like, that are spontaneous, but I think you should know, like, hey, if there might be some sort of a disagreement, or what we really should have done is, even in that moment, if we had just like paused and said like, hey, let's iron this out, just with, you know, not recording for a second, and then come back in 20 minutes and say, this is what we think. You know?
Right.
I think that just would have been there's a level of maturity that I didn't have then that I hope I have now.
A whole 6 months ago. Yeah.
A whole 6 months ago.
Yeah.
Man, time really flies, doesn't
it? Might have been only 5. I don't know. I think it was 6. It was like back in June. Yeah. At any rate, yeah. Interesting. I think some of my biggest regret has to do with the organization of the show. Specifically, even in just the last month, like we've ran into some issues with some of our production. We never really figured out how to do interviews right in terms of just the technical setup.
Right.
Which has led to audio quality issues, sound problems, and it's led to, I think our last 4 or 5 episodes have gotten out late, extremely late. And that's, I think, my biggest regret is a late episode for me is a big knock on the show. And we were doing really well. We'd only had, I think, 2 late episodes until this last month, the last season of the show. And we kind of fell apart here right at the end. And I really regret that. I think a lot of that is on me and just the planning ahead of how to do those, how to handle, like when we have a problem with our publishing or we have a problem with audio, how to address that. So I think, like if you're gonna start a show of your own, I think iron some of that out in advance. Kind of know what your limits are, know how to handle them, and be okay with not being where you want to be quite yet, as long as it means you can get something out consistently on the timetable that you have said. And by the same token, you know, that meant that, you know, we've fallen behind on keeping the website up to date. I messed up and it was down for like a whole month. I didn't realize a few months ago, because we had an issue with the domain, and I think it's still having issues. So if you go search it whenever this episode releases, a few days after we record, it's going to be like you'll find not the website that it should be. So I'm disappointed about that, but good notes and things to improve on. But I think all of that has more to do with the overall production of the show and overall that's just overall kind of podcasting regrets, not so much with this show in particular. I guess I don't know.
I think it's one of those things too, to talk about the website. Like, I think it's really important, and this is not advice that I followed, but it is something that I think is true. I think it's super important to pick like one thing that you're going to be good at.
Yes.
Like pick that one thing and basically keep doing that one good thing until somebody asks you to do more. And I think that's probably what I wish we would have done in terms of like some of the production stuff.
Right.
Like I wish we would have just made a absolutely perfect podcast, even if it was just one episode a month, and then built it to the point where somebody was like, hey, have you guys thought about doing a website?
Right.
Have you guys thought about doing thus and such? And I think it's tough. And
We got really ambitious. Yeah.
Oh, we were crazy ambitious because, to quote Mary Oliver, you were young, so you know everything.
Yeah.
I think it's really tough though when we live in an age that is so curated, where by the time that you see something, it's probably not in the growth stage.
Right.
Like it's probably not in the we've worked out all the kinks. It probably is in that stage. It's probably not in the stage where you're working out. Okay, well, we want to do this, and we're going to add this as well, and. We see so many companies that are like, this is our Instagram page. This is our website. This is our YouTube channel.
Like we've got it all. We're doing it great. Yeah.
This is our merch,
Of course, those are teams of multiple people that they're paying to do all that. And we were bootstrapping this whole thing. Like,
oh yeah,
we haven't made a dime off of this in 2 years. And that's somewhat intentional.
Yeah.
Like, we never sought sponsorships. We never sought to do ads. Because we did recognize we did not want to take away from the show. So that was one limitation that we had.
Yeah. And I think I'm glad that we did that. Like, I'm glad that that's what the show was. And because I'll say this, I listen to a lot of podcasts, or I have been listening to a lot of podcasts. And one of the results of this last challenge that we did, this prayer challenge, that's been very strange, is that I really don't enjoy listening to all the podcasts that I used to. Have you had this too?
Yes. Yeah. Exactly the same thing where I'm just like, I don't really need that anymore.
Yeah. I've just got to this point where it's like, they're always saying the same thing. And they're not super encouraging. Everything's kind of always going wrong. I've dipped back into a couple, like Art of Manliness I've listened to more recently than I have.
That's a mainstay.
Just did a really
for me.
good one on Roman emperors, which check that out.
I haven't listened to it yet. Yeah.
It's really good. And some more like story-based podcasts, but I've fallen away from like my sports podcasts. I don't really listen to anymore. Some of my like my fiction or my movie. I had some movie nerd podcasts I listened to. I don't really listen to most of those anymore. I just don't want to. I think it's connected to prayer and that time of silence and wanting that time of silence, but I'm not really sure how it went from one to the other. I'm not really sure how that happened.
I wonder if part of that is, like you said, you start to feel like some shows, they're just starting to say the same thing over and over. And that's happened with a number of shows I followed. I used to listen to some current events, some news podcasts, or podcasts that were kind of dealing with, how do you interact in a world like ours, and answering those types of questions. And after, a few episodes, they've kind of said what they have to say, and they're just kind of rehashing whatever the next current event is and giving it the same spin. And, I wonder if that is just kind of a natural fate of any show that goes on long enough.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I would be really curious, actually, and this is going to sound maybe a little egotistical, but if somebody was listening and wanted to be like, hey, this is the thing that you guys, I'm sure it would be different for both, for JJ and I, but like, what's the thing that we want to say and we just kept saying it? Like, I'm curious about that because, maybe it's the kind of thing where human beings just have the one thing to say. Maybe that's just like your thesis. And if I found out what that was at my age, I'd be kind of stoked because I'd be like, all right, that is,
you kind of know where you are.
That is my thing. Yeah. And now I'm just going to spend the rest of my life trying to get there.
I think,
maybe it needs to change.
I think there would be a danger in that actually, because, if you kind of identify this is my thing and you're never going to stray from it, sure, you might do that one thing really well, but you might never learn anything new. You might never approach it. You gotta be able to do that one thing and learn how to, bring that in and have a cohesive worldview of some sort. I don't know what that looks like. We're kind of learning that even now.
Yeah. And we're at an age where that is like, it's definitely in flux, whatever it is. Like, I've got a lot of changes coming around the pike where I'm like, oh, so who I am is about to change. What I'm going to be doing is going to change. What my daily role is going to be is going to change. And I don't know. I don't know what that's going to look like. I just know that it's going to be big. And I had a student was it yesterday? Yeah, it was just yesterday. Say something that I knew to be true, and I had probably heard said before, but the student said it in a way that was just so clear and precise that I was like, "That's exactly right." And the student said, "I was I was explaining predestination to some young students who were not familiar with Reformed theology at all, and so that's always a very amusing task, is trying to explain the concepts of Reformed theology to somebody who's like, so you think that God sends people to hell, or doesn't choose for them? Anyway, we've just lost half our listenership, but it's the last episode, so that's okay. We can burn that bridge now.
Finally, we get to say what we really wanted to say all along.
What we really think, because we were holding back. But anyway, so I was explaining some of these ideas, and I was explaining like how it's really a testament to our assurance of God's love, not for anything that we do, but because of his love for us. And explaining this a couple different times. And one of the students said, so you're saying that God doesn't love you because you're you. He loves you because he's him.
Yeah.
And I was like, yes, that's exactly right. That is 100% right. And I've just found that really comforting in a season of significant change in my life, thinking, wait, no, there's nothing that I'm doing that God is loving me for. There's nothing that, he's seeing into the future and he knows that I'm going to do this and that's why he loves me, or looking into the past and that's why he loves me. It's just because he is who he is. Right. And that's a pretty glorious thought. That's a pretty, but it's pretty astounding. Like it's pretty, nobody else says that. No other religion presents it to you that way. Not that I can think of.
Right. No, you're exactly right. And I think there's parts of, at the end of the day, this whole show is geared towards young Christian men specifically. And so I do think if we were to go back, kind of really digging into how each of these challenges could apply to our faith, I would love to do that at some point. Because, some of the challenges, I always use the ice bathing one as an example, because it's just kind of a popular thing to do. Nobody it's not necessarily tied to any one religion. It's just kind of tied to, well, we kind of think
Vikings.
Sure. But like heat and cold exposure is just one of those things that, at least for whatever reason in the modern era, we in America have kind of latched onto as like, oh, you should do that. Mm-hmm. And I'm not really sure why, but I think it would have been really good to explore some of those connections with some of these challenges. Fasting was a bit easier because there's a clear and obvious like command to fast in the Bible. But at the same time, there's a lot of people who are going about fasting for non-religious reasons, which, raises some interesting questions about, okay, so what are they doing here? Like, why is it that people are trying to take some of these things that, like fasting, that would have historically been tied to a spiritual practice, and now they're just approaching it from a purely scientific standpoint. There's things there that we could have gotten into, ideas that I've had. Like, I don't think it is purely scientific. I think that for some of these people, science is the new religion. And so they're going to do something that science says because that's their religion. And those would have been some really interesting things to explore, and we never got around to it. And I think that there would have been some really cool people to interview on that subject who have thought about worldview implications, who have thought about how society changes, how culture changes. And, I think going forward, I think Forging Honor is never going to really look the same after this episode, after today. But I think it's a really cool platform to be able to revive here and there when we have one of those questions that we want to hash out with somebody. And I think it'd be really fun to dig into some of those deeper elements and take some time on that.
Yeah, I like, the idea of a platform is, that has a life of its own these days. But I think it is interesting to think about, okay, so we did this for 2 years as young men.
Yep.
it's interesting to think about. Okay, well, this is our thing. This is our
Something we've built.
this thing we've built, this thing of ours, as they say. And what is it going to be in 5 years? Well, 5 years, you and I are not going to be the men that we are today. We're going to be older. We're going to be in a different category of person in some sense, right? Maybe fathers and not middle-aged, but like in that, younger to old, younger to old. We're going to be in that mid-30s to mid-30s range, and like maybe a little bit more wisdom, like maybe a little bit more knowledge.
If there isn't more wisdom, we're doing something wrong.
and so maybe we'll have a different thing to say. Maybe we'll have like things we wish we knew as young fathers, at the forge. Right. Maybe 20 years down the road, we'll be having midlife crises, and we'll say, remember that old technology podcasts? Let's, this is what we used to do before we had, insert technology here.
Right.
It could be something that we return to, not so much as like we're here for all time, but just as all right, well, this is the stage of life we're in now, and what do we think that the Bible has to say about this? What do we think that the Bible has to say about this concept, and how do we wrestle with that? Which is a cool little time capsule as we look back. Kind of scary. Do you have any anxiety about like, oh my goodness, in 20 years my children will be able to look back
and listen to their father?
This podcast?
Yeah. I've thought about that, and even just in the last 2 years, I've had to get very comfortable with putting stuff out there and being okay with the fact that there are mistakes in it. Like I have made so many mistakes with this show, and that just comes with the virtue of if you're going to do something, if you're going to learn, you're going to make mistakes. What is it? Elon Musk has what is it? I think he has with SpaceX. I can't remember the exact number. It's like 70-30. He's like 70% of their attempts are failures. And that's like his cutoff with his engineering team. He says you're not trying hard enough unless 70% of what you do is failing. And he's doing that in the context of engineering something, trying to build a reusable rocket, for example. Like you're going to fail a lot in that process. And if you're not okay with that, you're never going to proceed to the point where you are a success. And I think there's a risk taking that has to happen. And so on the one hand, it's kind of embarrassing. People will look back and be like, oh, these kids in their 20s didn't know anything, trying to do a podcast. Like what right do we have? On the other hand, I think it's just part of the failing and trying again that has to happen for us to gain some of that wisdom. And so I have no intention of taking any of this down, because if we did that, I think rather than that would be a withdrawal and an admission of failure in a negative way, rather than saying, those early episodes, not great. They're on the air. If you want to go listen to them, I wouldn't recommend it necessarily, but there's like, you can see the progress we've made. And I think that's important to be able to look back and be able to acknowledge how far we've come. Like I look at it as just a personal achievement of the fact that there's 68 episodes. Like how many podcasts make it 68 episodes? If you're listening to some of the big podcasts, they have thousands, but there's a lot of podcasts out there that get 2 or 3 in
2 years is a significant stretch of time.
And I did try to set some simple goals. Simply, all right, we're going to make it this year and we're going to get this many episodes out. And then, the first year, my only goal was make it a full year. And we did that. Second year, my only goal was we're going to go from every 2 weeks to every week in that time period. And we did that. Like there's just, in my mind, as many mistakes as we've had, as many regrets as we have, as much as we've messed up, I'm just thrilled that we've made it this far.
Yeah.
And it's really cool, because the other thing of it is, like you mentioned before we started recording, like people have stopped you and mentioned the show to you. Like that's super cool. Like that means somewhere, somehow we're making an impact on somebody. And so in my mind, if we've improved one young man's life along this way, or even young woman, older man, older woman, at the end of the day, we had our target audience, but we kind of did apply to a lot of people. If one person's life has been improved through this, I'm thrilled out of my mind. Yeah.
Glory to God with that. And 100%, like I think that we did, like I don't view we're taking time off, like we're stepping away, and we're hoping to come back to it. But I don't.
No guarantees.
Like for me, this is not. Yeah, no guarantees. But for me, this is like not in any way a failure. It's just like, okay, we've run its course.
Yeah.
Like we've run the race that was before us, and I thought it was a lot of fun. Well, I really enjoyed it.
And even if Forging Honor doesn't get revived, we both decide we're going to do other podcasts at some point, or we never do podcasting again. I think the stuff that we've learned through this about just from the technical side of how do you even do this? How do you publish an episode? How do you get something on the air? To kind of the other side of it of how do you organize something? How do you plan something? To the other side of how do you manage a relationship with a good friend when you disagree about the direction the show should take? Like that happened to us. Right. And I mean, we had a month there where we were kind of on the rocks as far as like trying to figure out the direction of the show, and we were getting really frustrated at each other. Remember, we had a ton of phone calls, and at the time I was super frustrated about it, but now it seems really dumb. And that's the other thing is like
funny how that happens
when you're endeavoring on a project like this, being able to look back and go, oh yeah, that thing that I thought was super important, not really important. Like that would be an encouragement to any young man. You're just in your 20s. The stuff that like I'm only 26, and I feel like the stuff that's happened in the last year, there's so much I thought was important at the time that is not.
Yeah.
And so going forward with that in mind I think that's going to be important for us no matter where we go.
Yeah, I think there's just like a huge shot of humility that comes through, especially, I mean, some of the folks that we had on here where it was like, oh, okay, so you know what you're talking about. Yeah. I do not.
Yep.
We
had some heavy hitters.
Yeah. And I think, that's one of the things that I'm most, and maybe, most proud of and most excited about is like, especially there are people that, the people that I brought on to interview are people that I am just like that I'm proud to know that I think are, may not have a huge platform, may not, get to speak in front of people very often, but, when we got to have them on, they got to share their wisdom and their knowledge or their insights with others and to get it recorded. And I think that was a tremendous blessing that I'm super excited about. And then to get to know some of the people that you know in your circles, JJ, and to be able to have those conversations with people that I wouldn't ordinarily meet, who are, geniuses,
right.
and great spiritual leaders and all that good stuff. I think that was just tremendously, it's been humbling for me to see how little I know and how much more I have to grow. And, but to know that I am surrounded by a great cloud of witnesses,
yes.
And to know that there are all these people around here who God has blessed. And it's very exciting to think about, like, where does the future lead?
Yeah.
What does it look like in 40 years?
I think what was so cool about the real heavy hitters we had on was realizing kind of the stuff I'm thinking about and going, oh, I have no idea. Like, what's the answer for this? I got to figure it out. Oh, someone else has thought about this. Like, there is nothing new under the sun. And every problem that I was facing, what was really cool about the show is God really used it in a way he would always put someone in my life or a conversation through the show that I would not have had otherwise, that encouraged me at just the right moment. And so I'm incredibly thankful for that. And if I'm going to issue a challenge to myself at the end of this, it's going to be to continue to have those conversations off air and learn how to connect with people in a way where I can learn from them rather than just dwelling with my own thoughts and trying to figure it out for myself.
Yeah, I think I was going to say one of the things that I'm really grateful for is, like, one of the things I miss about college, I'll say this, I miss being able to walk into a room with people.
Right.
And, find that one person who's an expert on X, or who's an expert on this, or just passionate about that one thing. And you say, okay, tell me everything you know about this. Or like getting to go up to professors and just say, like, hey, I have a question about, this. Can we get coffee? Can we go and talk? And one of the things I appreciated about the show was like, okay, I know that, once every couple of weeks, I'm going to have a conversation with somebody who loves Jesus and who is passionate about a topic, and they're going to tell me everything they know about the topic. One episode I'd encourage folks to go back on as we step away from the show for a little while is the Ross Cooks episode about community.
That was really good.
Because he just had some great stuff about like go out and do it. Like go and make a community around you. You know, start a poker night, start a movie club, start a coffee conversation. And as there's a podcast that came out recently. Speaking of different podcasts, podcast recently with Simon Sinek and Scott Galloway. I don't know if you know those guys at all. Very interesting folks. You can agree with them, disagree with them. They have some interesting stuff to say. And they had a conversation on Simon Sinek's podcast. I think it's called A Bit of Optimism. That was really interesting, and I'd highly recommend folks checking it out. And one of the things they talked about is like young men don't know how to have conversations anymore. Like they don't know how to carry a conversation. They don't know how to talk to strangers. And I can't remember if that was a challenge that we did or we just talked about doing.
We did a conversation challenge, like trying to have a conversation with somebody outside your normal circle. Was it
a total stranger or
it was? I'm trying to remember. It was early on. I mean, season 1 / first year.
I think it was just have a conversation with somebody. It was maybe in person.
It might have been
on the phone. Like,
it's really interesting to think about how COVID affected some of these.
Yeah, that's true.
Because we're doing all this after the COVID stuff, and like I think people were really wanting community in that. I'm going back. Where was that? It was Everybody Talks. It was the conversation about conversations. Right. Trying to have deliberate conversations with. I don't think.
I love how we chose the vaguest of adverbs. There.
Yeah, we folks, always
if you're
did.
trying to do a podcast, try and choose a more specific verb or adjective than deliberate.
So the challenge was to have an intentional or deliberate conversation every day with someone, even just 10 minutes, but someone that's not your family or that you're constantly around. So like
your immediate circle.
Yeah, it can be your immediate circle. So it needed to be someone that you had to like reach out to or interact with in a public place of some sort that you ran into, something like that. And yeah, learning to have a quality conversation it's tough. It's something I've had to work on for a long time, and I feel like I'm still working on.
And I'm not a pastor, nor do I play one on TV. But for any young men who are considering the pastorate, I am the son of a pastor and an observer of pastors, and actually even the son-in-law of a pastor, grandson of a pastor. I spend a lot of time with pastors. Let's just put it that way. One of the things that I think is just a critical component to the ministry that I don't know how often it gets talked about, because I haven't been to seminary, is like being able to have a conversation and being able to listen to people. Like the pastorate is not just about the pulpit. It's about the congregation. It's about shepherding the flock. And if you're a young man and you're thinking maybe God is calling you to the ministry, first of all, blessings, go with God. Second of all, and tertiarily, consider the mission field, because we need missionaries. But also think about like, what does it take to have a conversation? Because most of your work is going to be conversations with people and listening to them, and not telling them what to do and not giving them explicit advice. It's going to be listening. It's going to be learning those human skills that are required of you. And it's not all theology. And as much as I love Reformed theology and those doctrines, like learning to have a conversation and ask questions is just as much a part of that field.
You're exactly right. And I mean, even beyond pastors, but as Christians in general, I think that's such a big part of our outreach, is just being able to have a conversation with a total stranger. I will say, like, unintentionally, I've had to get better at that, because I'm a regular patron of a local cigar bar and pub, kind of 2-in-1 place.
It's your mission field.
It's a mission field. You could say that. But yeah, I mean, I have conversations with total strangers who are totally lost. I mean, it's remarkable the types of people you run into. Today I was having a conversation with a couple of older retired guys who just kind of trying to find the next thing that they're going to do. I know I've met interesting people who are kind of talking about the same types of theological things. You'll meet. I ran into a guy. He's a Catholic and very well versed on Catholic theology, and we got into a bit of a debate. That was a ton of fun. But then, really, most of the people I meet at or I meet a lot of people that are like trying to start businesses. They're passionate about stuff, but a lot of these people, they're completely lost. No clue about the direction. They're living in horrible, heinous sin a lot of the time, you know. And I say that like, I mean, I was over there last week and struck up a conversation with a guy, and he was talking about problems with his boyfriend, like this gay guy, and like stuff like that, where you're just like, I have no clue how to speak into your life right now, but I can sit here and listen and pray for you. And that's all I know to do sometimes. But like that never, I really honestly think that a big piece of that was through this show, kind of refining what I thought about some stuff, learning from other people, and being able just to sit back and not have an opinion sometimes, be able to listen to somebody.
Yeah.
And I don't know, that's important. And then being able to have a carry on a conversation with them. I don't really know where I'm going with this, just kind of thinking through like, what are some practical impacts this show has had on my day-to-day life?
Yeah. I think one of the things that I have been pushed to, along with the, like, have those conversations, is the more that I think we've pushed into like, what is going on right now, and what are the trends right now, the more I have felt like I need to go to the past to learn about things. And something that my pastor out here has said recently was, you know, his advice for young men and really for young Christians in general would just be like to go get an old book on Reformed theology,
right? You
know, a Bavinck or a Calvin or an Augustine or something like that, or just to reread the Confessions and the Westminster Standards. Yeah. And I think that's really good advice, because it is, it's so easy, you know, as the scripture says, to, you know, to be taken by every wind of doctrine. And, you know, somebody comes in and says something and it sounds true until somebody comes and cross-examines him. Even, you know, recently we just started a Sunday school on Proverbs, on wisdom literature. And I've been thinking about you and your, you know, your habit, your daily habit of reading the Proverbs. And I've been thinking about taking it up for the month of, you know, for the next month, because I thought I've been thinking about Proverbs and the wisdom literature and thinking like, I need more of this in my life. I need more of this, this wisdom and this, you know, I've just been struck recently by how, you know, wisdom is calling in the streets. It isn't hiding. It isn't hard to get to. It is there. It's like, it's begging to be found. It wants you to want it. And I think that is far different from my version of wisdom, or my conception of wisdom, which is, man, it's hard to get.
It's a secret, it's elusive somehow. Yeah. It's not. Open scripture, open the Bible. It's right there. But I mean, at the end of the day, the number one thing, everybody we had on, they all kept pointing to scripture. And that is something I really appreciated, was scripture and prayer, sticking with the spiritual disciplines, and just kind of the benefits that they all were preaching of that. Especially in our education series, or our kind of self-education series, I guess I should say. Every single one of them would say, yeah, it's great that you're reading these books. It's great that you're getting these things, but are you reading the Bible every day? Are you digging into that? Are you seeing what God has to say? If not, then everything you're doing is in vain. Everything you're doing is pointless. And that's been a real eye-opener for me, I think, because as a young man, kind of trying to make my way in this world, and, you know, kind of the time of life I'm in is, you know, I got to set myself up in society. I gotta build whatever it is I need to build right now. Got to provide for my family in a good way. Right. And so I'm just kind of jumping at anything that's like, all right, this is the thing, this is what I got to do. And every single one of these guys, who, especially the ones that are like in their 60s or older, they're like, okay, that's awesome, young man. You go do that. Like, you have the strength of a young man. Go do those things, but start with scripture. And that's been really good. I think I really appreciated the fact that I don't think any one of the older men that we had on ever once said, like, this is a terrible thing you're doing, like trying to put effort in on these things. Like, it was always, they never said that.
Yeah.
But they always kind of had that tempering effect of, you know, take your time. Don't exhaust your strength. You've been given the strength as a young man. And I really appreciated that perspective, I think, because, you know, I have run into outside of the circle of the podcast, I've run into old men who kind of they're like, oh, young men, they're just foolhardy, blah, blah, blah. I've run into others that are like, it's a good thing that young men have the strength. It's a good thing that they're doing this, but we as older men need to direct them. And so seeking out, I think I would give this advice to all young men is seek out an older man who can give you that direction and help hone that will that you have to affect change.
Yeah. Yeah. And to echo that, I think I am just more and more of an advocate for becoming a member of a local church.
Oh, yeah.
I like getting involved with, not just with having, mentors who are older than you, which is, phenomenal. And one of the great blessings of being part of a church and church discipline, that doesn't just mean like, correction from elders, but just, being trained up in the spiritual disciplines as well. But also like getting to pour into younger men's lives, like getting to help someone else out. I was listening, I can't remember, I think this was another Simon Sinek podcast, but he was talking about how in AA, in Alcoholics Anonymous, the 12th step is you need to help someone else. You need to help another alcoholic. And I don't remember exactly the statistics he said, but the vast majority of people who finish all 12 steps are able to maintain sobriety. And the vast majority of those who only do 11 out of the 12 and skip the last one fail at it.
Right.
And that's because like you're at your healthiest when you're helping somebody else.
Right.
And we want to make sure that everything is fixed and right and okay with us before we go help other people. But his advice was there's a level to which you're going to help yourself by going to help other people. That's going to be the thing that you need to do is just go reach out and pour into somebody. And the church provides a great place to do that and a great opportunity for the strength of young men, as long as providing a great tempering, support system that keeps them from, going totally off the rails.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. I've definitely experienced that in my own life, helping other young men. Kind of, it drives me to a higher standard because you're exactly right. You got to take the speck out of your own eye before you take the log out of the other person's eye. Or is it the other way around?
You got to take the speck out of your eye.
Take the log out of your eye before you take the speck.
Yeah.
Maybe you get what I'm saying. Yeah. Which, sidebar, one of the things about the show that I really appreciate is we have so rarely cut anything from our conversations. I think we have like edited them a sum total
Almost
of like
never.
3 or 4 times. Usually it was like when we like one time, like I have a thing against using my family members' names just because I don't want that information out there.
I think I used a name. Out
Yeah,
there
so
once.
we cut that, but like it's always something like that. We've versus like, oh, I said something wrong. Guess that's going on the show. Anyway, back to what I was saying about taking the log out of my own eye. What's interesting about that is it's not that you're told don't take the speck out of the other person's eye. You're still taking the speck out of their eye after you take the log out of your own eye. And so I think this show in a big way is an exercise of taking the log out of our own eyes in order to help other young men.
Yeah. I think that's true.
Which kind of leads to a follow-up. Like, I think one thing I would enjoy at some point, whether it's this show or a later show or a program of some sort, I think it would be good to jump into some of the heavier topics. Very carefully. This is something to do in my 30s or 40s. Very carefully jump into some heavier topics, specifically things like addiction, sexual sin. How do you deal with these issues? As young men, I think it's something that our culture is waking up to as a culture a little bit. But as Christians, there's such a... I feel like a lot of the messaging is simply, don't do it. Mm-hmm. And then there's a very few voices out there that are really speaking well to this. And I think it would be really good to kind of take some of those voices and see where we could have an impact.
Yeah, no, I agree with that for sure. I think that would be I think it would be very difficult, but I think it would be, again, it's like
that's something to do in your 30s or 40s, 40s or 50s even.
30s
like,
or 40s.
I mean, there's something that
it's
just age brings wisdom, and there's a reason we didn't get into some of that at this point in time.
Yeah, but I think it would be good. And like another thing, you're talking about some of the sexual sin issues, which, yeah, 100%. I think it'd be amazing to get to talk about some of those things and to work some of those issues out. I think one thing that that I want to go ahead and like put on people's radar as like, hey, check on your young men in your life is like sports gambling.
Yeah.
Because that is going to be
That's huge right now.
That's going to be a huge issue, and there's not going to be the monitoring of it. I think about the problems that my maybe parents didn't think about going in because they just hadn't any.
It didn't really exist.
It didn't exist, and I think some of the internet issues just weren't a problem, and they didn't know where to look. I think sports gambling is going to be
kind of the next
a similar
one.
thing for the next one where it's like, the kind of thing where you could just end up with really kids who are thousands of dollars in debt, who are gambling their way into total ruin, just because nobody's looking for it, just because nobody's paying attention, and they might not know where to go for help. Right. And so that's just the kind of thing where I'd be like, check in on them, make sure they're having a good conversation every once in a while about some of those things.
Yeah, I think that there's some opportunity there. And so if there's anyone in there, anyone who's older and wiser than us who can speak into these things, I think, or you could point us in the direction of someone who's older than wiser than us speaking on these things, that would be, I think, well worth pointing people in that direction. But all right, final episode, getting in towards our last few minutes of 2024, of last few minutes of Forging Honor for the time being. Kind of what are your hopes and dreams for kind of the show going forward? Like, are there any ideas you've had that are like, this is something you really want to do at some point? What kind of is the grand vision of Banjo as far as Forging Honor or podcasting generally? Like, where do we go from here?
Well, man, I'm gonna get all weepy eyed now thinking about what's next. I don't know. I think one thing that this is not a Forging Honor. This is like a side topic. One podcast that I've always wanted to do is like my take on movies and entertainment, and to talk about like, what's a good movie? Like, how do you? That's an area that I personally feel like. Exactly. Like, I think that if there's, this is not like the area where the church is, at its most anemic, but I am always frustrated with the lay person's understanding of like what makes a movie good or what makes a movie bad or how to understand art. Like that just frustrates me. And it's a conversation that I want to educate people on. And it's a thing that I'm passionate about. I don't think that ever really fit under the umbrella of Forging Honor. Mm-hmm. Like I don't think that was ever what we were trying to do. Obviously I squeezed it into whatever conversation I could because that's my obsession. Yeah. Which, let me file that under like the category of regrets is there were times when Forging Honor turned into the Banjo's Hobby Horse Happy Hour.
There's a good
with whatever
title of a show right there, Banjo's Hobby Horse Happy Hour. I would listen to that show. So I apologize for any Kierkegaard rants you folks had to listen to. That like
you
every
didn't
episode
want to.
for the past 6 months.
Yeah, that was
kidding.
pretty much it. But I think looking forward, I'll say this without getting into too many specifics. I think that my vision of what's important and what's not important in the next 10 months and a couple of years is going to really zero in. Like, mm-hmm. I think I'm going to really quickly figure out like, oh, this thing that I thought was a crucial issue is not at all. Mm-hmm. And I think that one of the things that I would want to promote on the show is like, what does it take to be an elder or a deacon?
That'd be really interesting.
Especially maybe I feel like I understand elders. I watch elders a lot, but like, what does it take to be a deacon? Like, talk about an uncelebrated, unsung position in the church. Right. Like, that just needs to be known. Like, people need to know that's an office in the church, and we need deacons. They're a crucial element. And I don't know if I have what it takes to be a deacon or an elder. I know, or whatever. But how do we train young men, even from a young age, to be thinking about that and to enter into those positions as a place of, I'm here not to be served, but to serve,
right.
To give your life in that sense. So I don't know. What about you?
Yeah, I think for me, selfishly, there's a piece of me that's just, I love the effort we put into Forging Honor. I'm like, we have a great logo.
Yeah.
I want to keep the logo,
Yeah,
like stuff like that.
It was a good logo,
like things like that.
We should get a T-shirt.
We have good music. My brother did a good job on that.
Yeah.
Things like that. Yeah, we never got a T-shirt. We never got stickers. I want to do that. Like I want a hat.
Yeah.
It'd just be fun.
I wanted a mug. I wanted a Forging Honor mug.
Yes, we got to do a Forging Honor mug. So I would like to see kind of the Forging Honor brand revived in some form at some point.
Yeah.
I think in the in-between times, I want to see a real honing of what the vision of Forging Honor is. Like, what does it become? And I think, the real core of the idea when we first started was we're going to try things as young men that we're being told you should do as a young man. Some of them will be successful. Some of them will not be. But the hosts are the guinea pigs, and we're going to give it a shot. Mm-hmm. And so I think I would want to go back to kind of that original vision, take more time with some of these things. I've already mentioned longer periods of time, fewer episodes for each challenge, but a longer period of time, and really dig into it with some good interviews, really learn. I think that's where the show has shined, and that's where we can grow moving forward. What does that exactly look like come 2025, 2026? I don't know yet. But I'm not like, I don't know, there's always a cliche of like the YouTuber says, all right, I'm not doing weekly episode or uploads now. I'm going to go to monthly, and then they never upload again. Like, we're not declaring any of that. I don't want us to go the way of all these other shows and YouTube channels. I want us to come back strong with a clear vision of the direction that we're going in. Be able to allow for some of those deeper conversations in a way that we haven't. That really informs kind of the habits, the practical side of life, because I think that's what young men are looking for a lot of the time. At least that's what I look for. So
community. They're
looking for community, and they're looking for, all right, what do I do? Right? Like, how do I fix this problem in my life? How do I achieve this thing I want to achieve? And you can kind of throw all these cool ideas at them. You can throw all kinds of cool ideas at me, but if I don't know how to apply it, it's just an idea. It just kind of exists. Once I can apply it, once I can do something with it, and once I've heard someone who has true knowledge on the subject really expound to me the benefits of whatever it is, now I can go forth. So I want to get back to that core nugget of the show. And I want us to be able to take what we've done here and build on it in a really good way. I think there's a solid foundation if we can kind of strip back some of the noise, strip back some of the weaker episodes, some of the weaker takes that we've had, and really dig into it. So we'll see. Yeah.
Maybe the last thing I'll say is this, and sorry that it was the last thing that I said, but dear listener, thank you for sticking with us for all this time. Whether you've been with us from the beginning, our very first episodes with our honor journal, and writing about our early heroes, or if you've just joined us in season 2 or what have you, thank you for being part of this and for thanks for listening to us. We don't have much we don't have much experience. We don't have much knowledge. And it means a lot that you would, take an hour, take a couple hours, even, in these Forging, these after hours episodes, to listen to a couple of young guys who don't really know what they're talking about and who are really just interested in different topics. It means a lot that you would listen to us, and that, if any of this has been helpful, we're really glad. But we're really thankful that you have been listening along with us. If we do still have, I think, a Twitter page
that never gets updated
somewhere. That never gets updated. If you want to add us, if you want to ask us questions, I think it's fair to say you can reach us there. Maybe if you have ideas for later iterations of the show at some point, maybe you can drop us a line and let us know. But we do just want to say thanks.
It's been a ton of fun. I'm excited for what comes next. Are there any, if you were to issue one final challenge, what would it be?
Ooh, resist urge to make snarky TV show comment. One challenge. I think my last challenge, I would want to do something that we haven't done before. So I think I would say go a week without outside noise, by which I mean go a week without a YouTube video, go a week without a podcast,
music,
go a week without
even.
No, I think music. I would allow music.
What about
keep music?
Like, would you make a distinction between like personally listening to the music versus listening to the music kind of in the presence of others? Like earbuds versus speakers.
I don't think I would go that far because some people might actually use the music for thinking. And my objective would be like create more quiet time than you're comfortable with. That's really what the goal of it is. Even recently for me, I've switched from watching TV on my computer to mostly watching it on. I have TV shows that I watch that are on DVD, and that's actually been really nice because it means that I'm not watching it on my computer, so I can't watch it in my bedroom or on in the kitchen. I have to watch it in the living room TV, and just having that set up so it's like, okay, so for these 45 minutes, the thing that I am doing is watching this TV show. Has been helpful because it's like, okay, I'm going to enjoy this right now. But I think being able to say, kind of like we were talking about with like podcasts, like you've been listening to us, dear listener, for, if you've been here for a while, 2 years now, like maybe go listen to your own thoughts. Like, what do you have to say? What do you have to think about? What's on your heart? Take that time and figure it out because you don't need to be listening to us, quite frankly, right? You go do something. And if you're not sure what to do, I think, read scripture and pray. And I think the Lord will reveal that to you. So,
Yep.
How about you? You got a final challenge that you would issue?
Obviously the nice Christian answer is go read your Bible or go pray more. And yes, do that. Mm-hmm. I think if I was going to issue a final challenge, it would be write down every responsibility that you have in your life. And then order them. So maybe you have, 10, 15 like regular responsibilities, or like you've got all kinds of tasks that you have to do. And then take like the top 3 and cross everything else off. And try to, as a young man right now, pick those top 3 things, and that's all you focus on. And those top 3 things would fall maybe 4. They would fall into a couple categories. One might be a family category. One might be a work/income category, and one might be a personal hobby category. And like, that's it. Because I think throughout this entire time of Forging Honor, until really in the last few months, I've had so many different responsibilities and so many different focuses that I've not been able to do all of them to the fullest extent of my capability. Yeah. And that's something I've really been trying to do is hone my responsibilities to the point where I can do each one with such excellence that it can truly be to the glory of God in a glorious way. Yeah. That would be my final challenge, is like, take those things and be really good at those very few things. Be an amazing husband/father. Be an amazing member of your church. That's the 4th thing. Be an amazing member of your church. Be an amazing employee or business owner or whatever it is you're doing. And then pick that one hobby that's kind of your outlet. Be amazing at that. And just really dive in. I don't think you really need more than that. And I think as young men, we're kind of lied to and we're told you have to do it all. You don't. Yeah. You got to do that one thing really, really well. And I think you'll be surprised. It kind of carries over to other stuff. I've been surprised, even in just a few months of only focusing on a few things, And basically, I just say no to any activity that's not one of those few things.
Yeah. Yeah.
The benefits are amazing. And you also discover that you have more time to do those things once you've cut everything else. So anyway, kind of a long-winded answer, but that would be my final challenge. Hone.
Well, it wouldn't be a regular episode if we weren't a little long-winded.
Fair enough.
If we were a little, we gotta do a little of that.
Fair enough.
So,
well, thank you, listeners, followers, everybody that's been along the journey. We apologize for us as hosts. I kid. We've had a ton of fun, and this has been awesome. Banjo, thank you for doing this with me. I'm looking forward to what may come, and don't unsubscribe. We may drop a random Forging Honor after hours episode here and there as we come across someone that we're like, we really need to talk to them, or we want to record this. That'd be fun. So
watch out for the bat signal.
Oh yeah. It will come.
All right. Well, thank you much.
Thank you.
This has been the Forging Honor podcast. Music and production is by Elliot George. For more information about what we do or to learn how to get involved, visit our website at forginghonor.com. There you'll find information about our community, the Forge, and how to join other young men seeking to glorify God in thought, word, and deed. You'll also find blog articles, book recommendations, and more ways to grow as a Christian man.
If you enjoyed the show, please tell a friend or family member about Forging Honor. We would also appreciate it if you would take a moment to like and subscribe. And if you're on Apple Podcasts, a rating and review only takes a moment, and it goes a long way towards growing the Forging Honor community.
Thanks for taking the time with us today. We hope you'll take up the work alongside us and join us in the task of Forging Honor. We'll see you next time.